Hello, thank you so much for joining me today for another romance recommendation video, and today I'm talking masked men. So the first book I'm recommending today is Ruthless Savage by Lilian, and this is book one in her Savage Kings series. This one is an Irish mafia romance between Eru, who is an Irish mafia princess, and Devlin, who works for her father and is essentially her bodyguard. So there's an age gap between these two. Now Eru's actually been in love with Devlin since she was sort of mid-teens, and unfortunately he ended up going to prison for a couple of years. And while he was in prison, she wrote to him and attempted to go and see him. And of course, he didn't think this was appropriate, and therefore he never wrote back to her. But still, he was very attracted to her as much as she was attracted to him. And when he finally comes out of prison, he goes back to work for her father, and he's actually appointed as her bodyguard while she is in college. And once again, Eru basically uses every opportunity she can to flirt with Devlin, hoping that he'll notice her and want to be with her. But of course, he knows his place. He is definitely not supposed to marry Eru. She's definitely not for him. He's much older than her. So of course, he continues to turn down her offer. So when she's flirting with him, he kind of knocks her back. Then it comes to a bit of a head because her father actually wants to arrange her in marriage to someone else, and the person he wants to arrange her in marriage to is actually not a particularly nice guy. And of course, Devlin's protective side really starts to come out, and he determines that he really doesn't want this guy to marry her. So he's trying to look for a way really to stop this marriage going ahead, but he knows that he really doesn't have too much of a leg to stand on. But Eru really wants to take matters into her own hands, and she knows that one of the selling points for this marriage is her virginity. And so she kind of comes up with a scheme with her roommate that if she loses her virginity, then she'll no longer be suitable for marriage and therefore won't be forced into marrying this guy that she doesn't like. And of course, the way she's going to lose her virginity is to attend a sex club. And of course, Devlin is going to find out about this and follow her to the sex club with the intention of keeping her safe. And so that she doesn't know that she's been followed, because she kind of sneaks out to go to this sex club, Devlin then, when he gets to the sex club, wears a mask. And so he ensures that he is the one that she interacts with in the sex club, but of course she doesn't know his identity. But things really start to go from there. So next up, I want to recommend God of Wrath by Rina, and this is book 3 in the Legacy of the Gods series. Now I could have actually recommended a couple of books in this series because the hero in this one is actually part of a secret society in college, and the people in this society all wear masks. So this is a dark romance. It's mafia adjacent, it's enemies to lovers, and this is a college romance. We're following Jeremy and Cecily. So our hero in this one is Jeremy Volkov. He is a Russian mafia heir, and he happens to be going to school at King's U, which is a fictitious university on an island near to Brighton in the UK. And Jeremy is actually the founding member of the Heathen Club, which, like I say, is kind of this secret society. It's a bit of a club where the elite of this school are part of, and Jeremy kind of rules it with an iron fist. Now there's a group of them that are part of this club, and as part of what they do, they kind of organise these events, and when you go to an event, the members of the Heathens tend to wear masks, and Jeremy in this case is the man who wears an orange mask. Now like I said, the heroine in this one is Cecily. She's actually part of a separate group that goes to a rival university on this same island, and actually at the start of this kind of series, or what we learn about Cecily, is that she is actually believes that she's in love with another character called Landon. Now Landon doesn't really want anything to do with her, but he kind of strings her along a little bit. But she knows that he's into primal play, and she comes up with this idea that she's gonna join this app where you can input your kind of like your requirements, and it will match you to a sexual partner. And she puts in all the requirements that she believes will make sure that she's matched with Landon, but actually what happens is she ends up getting matched with Jeremy. Now this whole time she thinks she's being matched with Landon, so when she actually goes to meet the person that she's been matched with, she's expecting Landon, but it's actually Jeremy. But it's already too late because he is not going to let her go so easily, and of course he is going to be chasing her through the woods because these two are very much into primal play. So there's loads more that goes on in this book. While you can read it as a standalone, I do recommend reading The Legacy of the Gods in order, because as we go through, the storylines really building on each other, and we definitely see all of the characters in all of the books, so you get much more of a rich history between Jeremy's character and Cecily's character and how that's going to progress as we get to their book. But if you're looking for a man in a mask, then Jeremy is definitely a hero you're going to want to check out. So next up then, we've got Brutal Ambition by Sam Mariano, and this is a standalone, but it's actually a spin-off from her Coastal Elite series. And this therefore is another dark romance. It's also set in college, and it's also another secret society situation. In fact, it's much more of a secret society than the previous book, which was more kind of like an elite club, if you like, for mafia heirs and very rich kids. So in this one we're following Killian, and he is part of the Blue Bloods, which is a secret society, and you know, he's got a great amount of ambition in terms of what he wants to achieve. But as a blue blood, they kind of wear masks and also kind of like dark cloaks when they're either attending meetings or going through initiation and things like that. And our heroine in this one is Bryn, and she happens to be a virgin heroine as well. In fact, she's going to become a sacrificial virgin for a secret society sacrifice that takes place. But it's not what you think or what you'd expect from Sam Mariano, because it's not Killian who is doing the virgin sacrifices. So let me explain. So at the start of this book, we have a situation where our heroine Bryn has been invited to a party by someone that she's recently met, and this guy who she thinks is really, really charming and nice, and he's invited her out on this date, and she's very excited to go. It's actually a Halloween party, so it's fancy dress, and she's actually obsessed with Man in Mask, particularly the Phantom of the Opera, and so she goes to this fancy dress party dressed as Catherine from Phantom of the Opera. Now, when she gets to this party, she gets lured down into the basement where this person that she's with, the date that she's with, has lured her down into the basement because he is a wannabe. He wants to join a secret society. He's been rejected from Killian's society, the Blue Bloods, and so he's decided he's going to get together with a group of mates and set up his own secret society. And of course, they're going to kickstart this with a virgin sacrifice, and Bryn is the person in the frame to help them carry this out. Now, the Blue Bloods have heard about this, and while they don't particularly care what anyone else wants to do, and they don't particularly care about Bryn, what they do care about is their own reputation, and they don't think it's going to be too good if anyone hears about this, or particularly if people mistake this activity for what is part of their secret society. So Killian is sent to kind of keep an eye on things, see what he can find out, and intervene if necessary. And so of course, when he goes to this fancy dress party himself, actually dressed as a blue blood, wearing his cloak and his mask, then he does kind of figure out what's going on. And like I said, he doesn't particularly care about Bryn at this point, but he wants to stop what's going on in the basement. And so as she's being kind of strapped to a table and things are starting to really heat up, Killian makes himself known. He goes down there, he kind of rescues her, and they kind of leave the party. Now, this is really taking Bryn out of the frying pan into the fire, because Killian takes an interest in Bryn and decides for her safety that she's going to have to go home with him, because these guys know obviously who she is, she's seen them, and so potentially now her life is in danger. And so Killian pretty much forces Bryn to go with him and stay in his apartment. And because he is a Sam Mariano hero, although he has saved her from this particular situation, he is obviously going to be very kind of like morally grey. He is very possessive and controlling, and he is going to be quite manipulative and make sure that he gets exactly what he wants from Bryn, and so their story goes from there. Sticking with the sort of secret society theme, the next one I've got for you is The Ritual by Shantel Tessier, and this is book 1 in the Lords series. This is another dark college romance, and in this one the guards kind of wear white masks resembling skeletons, while the members seem to wear black masks with black cloaks. So this is kind of another black cloak situation going on as well. And very similar to Brutal Ambition, this kind of also opens with a party where everyone at the party is kind of wearing masks. So it's kind of a masked themed party, and the hero and heroine in this one is Riot and Blakely. Now Riot, our hero, he is part of this secret society. In fact, during his 4 years at college, he's been going through initiation, and during initiation, to show his loyalty, he has remained celibate. But in his senior year, in his final year, he is now able to claim a woman that he can use and abuse, do whatever he wants with her as kind of a reward for his loyalty so far. And then after this final year, he'll be fully initiated into this secret society. Now, of course, there's a whole group of them going through the same initiation, and one of his supposed friends, another person in the secret society, his girlfriend happens to be Blakely. Now, Blakely has become quite frustrated with her boyfriend because, of course, he's also had to remain celibate, and so she's been trying to encourage him to sleep with her, and she's becoming more and more frustrated that he hasn't taken her up on the offer, and she doesn't know why. And of course, he's kept it to himself because he's part of this secret society. He hasn't actually told her what's going on, and so in a bit of retaliation to try and get back at him, because she's kind of angry with her boyfriend, when she goes to this party, she comes across this person wearing a mask, which happens to be Ryan, and she doesn't know, and basically they kind of flirt with each other. One thing leads to another, and they end up in a room together. Now, Riot doesn't full on sleep with her at this point, but definitely things happen between them, and she becomes very kind of like interested in Riot generally. Wind forward to them being able to choose a woman that they can use and abuse, do whatever they want with in their senior year, and Riot is pretty much told by someone in the society that he has to pick Blakely. And now this is a little bit awkward, of course, because I've said that she is another member's girlfriend, but he obviously has to follow orders, and so he kind of like, again, manipulates Blakely into being with him for his final year in college. And of course, her boyfriend is not going to be too happy about that. That's going to cause disruption for this couple. Of course, like I said, this is a dark romance. Riot's character is very morally grey, so while he is very obsessive and possessive, all of those attributes that we like about a morally grey hero, he very much starts out only being with Blakely because he's told to be, but it's not too long before his interest in her becomes a little bit deeper, and he starts to realise that he has actually got feelings for her, and that's going to make it even more complicated for them going forward. So next up, I've got Corrupt by Penelope Douglas. This is book 1 in the Devil's Night series. This is another dark romance. This time it's kind of set in high school, although it does move through into college, and it also is a relationship between Erica or Rika and Michael, and Michael happens to be the older brother of Erica's boyfriend. So this happens to be a brother's girlfriend kind of situation. At the start of this book, Rika is about 16 and Michael is about 19, so there's a 3-year age difference between them, and Rika has very much always had a thing for Michael. There's definitely a connection between them, and she is very kind of attracted to him and kind of wants to be with him. However, she is in a relationship with his younger brother Trevor, who's the same age as her, and although she does like Trevor, she doesn't have as strong feelings for him as she does for Michael. But the thing is, their parents really want Rika and Trevor to be together, so ever since they've been kids, their parents have been friends, and there's always been this sort of thing where Rika and Trevor will end up together, and so Rika's kind of forced into this kind of like boyfriend-girlfriend situation with him, but really it's always been Michael for her, but they really don't want her to be with Michael. And Michael doesn't have a particularly good relationship with his father, and again, it's this kind of morally sort of grey character who really kind of like rebels. He's always kind of been a bit dark, a little bit broody, and I guess that's probably one of the reasons why Rika is so attracted to him, right? Because, you know, he's older and a little bit more mysterious. Now, this book is part of the Devil's Night series because Michael has a group of friends. There's actually 3 friends, so there's 4 of them in total, and kind of every year throughout high school they always taking part in what they call Devil's Night, and they kind of like use one night a year to really rain sort of chaos down on their town. They'll disrupt things, maybe even vandalize things, play pranks on people. And at the start of this book, like I say, Michael is 19, he's actually gone away to college, he's actually left high school, but he's come back with his friends to carry on the tradition of Devil's Night. And during Devil's Night, they always wear masks, even though everyone knows it's them, but so that there's actually no proof it's them, they always wear masks on Devil's Night. On the day of Devil's Night, they basically come through the school. They collect other students that want to go with them, and the rule is really you have to be 18 to go. But Rika really kind of wants to go with them, and so she makes the decision to go, and she ends up going with Michael and his friends, and they kind of let her tag along. Basically, they let her tag along and take part in whatever they're doing. Now, unfortunately for them, things take a bit of a turn on this night, and the following day evidence is actually revealed that means that Michael's friends end up being prosecuted for something that happens, and they end up going to prison. And so there's a time jump in this book where then they're out of prison, and now they absolutely want to get together to seek revenge on Rika, because they very much believe that it's her fault that they have gone to prison. And so the situation goes from there, because like I say, Michael and Rika do have this connection, but he spent the last several years being very, very angry with her about what happened and plotting revenge against her. So things are going to be very rocky to start before they start to figure things out. Next up, I've got a book that I've read recently, just last month, and that's Lights Out by Navessa, and this is book 1 in the Into Darkness series. This is another dark romance. It's actually a stalker romance with a hidden identity, an obsessed hero, touch her and die vibes, and we were following Ali and Josh. Now, Ali is a trauma nurse, so she's seen some pretty horrific things at work, and she's obsessed with work, so she works really, really long hours, is always kind of really exhausted, and therefore she doesn't really have time for a boyfriend. She's had hookups in the past, and in fact her most recent hookup is Josh's roommate. But one night after a particularly bad day at work, she gets home, she decides she wants to call Josh's roommate for a bit of a booty call, only to be turned down by him because he's like, hey, thanks for contacting me, but it's been 2 months since you last called and I've kind of moved on, I've got a girlfriend now. And she's like taken aback, because has it really been 2 months? But undeterred, she turns to the next option that she has available to her, which is this account that she's been following on social media with a man in a mask. Who very much makes thirst trap sort of videos with him wearing a mask, but he very much shows his bare chest and kind of, you know, does sexually explicit content, shall we say, while wearing his masks. And she is really obsessed with this guy. She's one of his biggest fans. She's watching every video that comes out. She's leaving comments on his social media account. What she doesn't know is that the guy in the mask is actually Josh, who is her ex-hookup's roommate, and he's been keeping his eye on her because ever since his roommate brought her home for the first time, he's kind of looked into her, found out more about her, and he's kind of been doing a little bit of light stalking. And now he knows that she's been watching his social media account, he is going to get even more interested, and he decides to test her to see if she really is into dark, mysterious guys in masks, and wouldn't mind if he broke into her apartment and just was there when she got home, or if she's all talk. And so he sneaks into her apartment while she's not there, sets up some cameras, and creates one of his videos in her bedroom. And so the next time she goes to watch one of his videos, she recognises her room and realises that he's been in her house. And so he's absolutely delighted to see her reaction. And then they start a bit of a tit for tat situation where she is desperate to find out who he is, and he kind of evades her at every turn while still keeping his eye on her. The interesting thing about this one is that one of the reasons our hero is wearing a mask is because he's trying to keep his identity hidden. Because what we find out is that his dad is actually a famous serial killer. He looks very, very similar to his dad, and so when he goes out in public, people actually recognise him, know who he is, and it makes him feel really, really awkward. And so he spends most of his time alone in the apartment, is a bit of a recluse, and so his only outlet really is this social media that he's been doing where he wears a mask. And so he does wear it very much to keep his identity hidden. And so, like I say, yeah, they start to play this cat and mouse game where she's trying to figure out who he is. But what I really did like about this one is that it doesn't take her too long to figure it out. So it's not one of those things where she doesn't actually recognise the person in the mask. She starts to think, hang on a minute, this guy is familiar, and starts to figure it out pretty quickly, which I really did appreciate. Next up, I've got something a bit different because I'm going to recommend a monster romance, and this is Gloam by Mayne, and this is book 4 in her Monstrous series. So like I said, this is a monster romance. It's also an MM pairing in this one. Post-apocalyptic situation, age gap, and a bit of a fantasy romance as a result. And we were following Gloam, who is our monster, and Rig. And his real name is Adam, but everyone calls him Rig. That is his nickname. Now, like I said, this is a post-apocalyptic sort of setting because we are on Earth, but there has kind of been a rift, if you like, and these monsters have come through this rift. Some monsters are good, some monsters are bad, but it's very much changed our society. And so there are humans who are part of the military who are trying to defeat the monsters, some monsters going on their merry way, trying not to get involved. And then, as you would expect in this sort of situation, some human communities that are trying to live how they want to live without any interference from the military or these monsters. And there are also humans who are taking absolutely every advantage from this situation and using it to their own ends. And so Gloam is a very unfortunate monster who has a lot of power, but he is currently being controlled by a lady called Mary, and he's part of Mary's menagerie because Mary is a human. She kind of travels from town to town in her kind of caravan, but she seeks out unusual kind of monsters because she's kind of collecting them. And so Gloam is one of her monsters, and she's able, and although, like I say, he's very powerful in his own right, she's able to control him. And in particular, she has put a cage around his head. So he's definitely, you know, a masked man, if you like, because he's kind of got this metal cage around his head with very small slits so that he can see. But as a result of wearing this mask, he also cannot talk. And the reason he cannot talk with this mask is pretty gruesome, which we find out as we go further into the book exactly what is going on with Gloam, why he's got this on his head, why he can't get it off, and why Mary's able to control him. And how these two characters meet is because Mary is actually camped outside a human community because she is trying to get her hands on a monster that happens to be inside, and these humans are very much protecting this monster, one of which is our character called Rig. And while he's kind of on duty, he's kind of defending the wall of this community, if you like. He spends a lot of time looking out then, watching Mary, keeping his eye on her, and he kind of sees the comings and goings. And he becomes very intrigued by Gloam because Gloam is, like I say, it's quite a big monster, but he is kind of chained to Mary's caravan, and he kind of has to walk along behind it. But like I say, Rig becomes very intrigued by Gloam. He spends a lot of time watching him, and he starts to feel very empathetic towards him and wants to try and help him escape from Mary. And so what he decides to do is that he's going to get into Mary's favour and ask if he can travel with her when she moves on from this town and basically go with Gloam so that he can figure out a way to save him, like I said, to rescue him. Now, because Gloam can't speak, they actually start writing little notes backwards and forwards to each other in a notepad when Mary is sleeping, so they don't arouse suspicions, and Rig is not going to rest until he's figured out a way to rescue Gloam. But before things get better, things get a lot worse, because while Rig very much believes that they were going back to Mary's sort of house, back to her menagerie, where she's actually taking them is to this kind of place where there's a cult, and yeah, things get a little bit dicey for Rig before he is actually able to save Gloam. And that's all I'll say. But I thought it was an interesting take on a man wearing a mask, because in this case we don't see Gloam's face for quite some time because he's wearing this metal cage around his head. Next up is another recent read and a book that I absolutely loved, which is By the Letter by Julia Wolfe, and this is book 2 in her Mile High Billionaires series. So as the name suggests, this is a contemporary billionaire romance with close proximity. These two become neighbours, hidden identity. It's a one-night stand in a sex club, and it culminates in a surprise baby, and we were following Roman and Shearer. So right at the start of this book, Roman and Shearer are matched on an app for a sex club, and Shearer is sort of very, very sweet, and she's very, very shy, and she doesn't like asking for things in the bedroom, and so she really wants to experience a night of kind of passion with a man where he very much has free use, so he can do whatever he wants with her, and she doesn't have to ask him for what she wants. He's just going to do it, and she's going to enjoy it. And so she's actually matched with Roman, and they agree that they're not going to share names, and they're also going to wear masks, so they also conceal each other's identity. And so Roman actually turns up wearing a kind of a balaclava over his face, and Shira also gets a mask as well, and so they have this amazing night together. Now unfortunately at the end of the night one of their condoms splits, and so Roman says to her, you know, I'm so sorry it ended like this, but I will leave my name and number at the front desk, therefore if the worst should happen, you know how to reach me and I'll make sure that you're taken care of. Shira's like, don't worry, I'm not worried, I'm sure it'll absolutely be fine, and they kind of go on their merry way. Skip to then they're meeting kind of in real life, because Shira was actually recently widowed. She was married to a much older man and he was a billionaire, and now she's inherited his kind of money and also his company. So she is now the CEO of her ex-husband's company. Roman, on the other hand, is kind of a loose family friend, shall we say, but also he specialises in helping struggling companies, and he works out whether he can actually bring them back and make them successful, or if not, then to protect his investment he sells off the assets. And so since Shira's taken over as CEO for his friend's company, things have started to take a downhill turn, or that's how at least it appears. And so Roman goes to this company to see if he can save it, but he's also heard some bad things about Shira by her stepdaughter, who is a similar age to Shira. The stepdaughter really doesn't like Shira at all, and she's been telling quite a few lies to Roman about her, and therefore Roman goes in with this really bad impression of Shira right from day one. And so they really don't get on, and Roman is not at all nice to Shira. He doesn't treat her very well, and when it gets down to it, he ultimately unseats her as CEO and kind of removes her from the position. And of course Shira is devastated by this and really upset about how Roman's treated her. And this all happens at the same time she finds out then that she's actually pregnant, and so she leaves a message at the front desk of this sex club to tell the man that she slept with that he is the father of her child. And of course that's when they both realise that they had an amazing night with each other, and now Roman's got quite a lot of grovelling to do to make up for the situation he's found himself in, and to kind of rebuild a relationship with Shira, get her trust so that he can be part of his baby's life. And I really did enjoy this one because of how their relationship really developed and how much work Roman really had to put in to win Shira over. So absolutely loved it, would definitely recommend. But starts out, like I said, with two people wearing masks to hide their identity. And finally then, an absolute recent read, this is one I just finished this week, and that's Wild Side by Elsie Silver. This is book 3 in the Rose Hill series, so this is a small town romance, and we were following Reese and Tabby. So the story for this one is that Tabitha had a sister, and her sister sustains an injury while playing volleyball, and she is prescribed pain medication that she later becomes addicted to, and this sends her down a very dark path of addiction. But then her sister finds out that she's pregnant, and as a result of that she goes into rehab, and she really is determined then to get clean for the sake of her child. And then Milo is born, and Milo is Tabitha's nephew. So her sister actually remains clean for a couple of years before she starts going off the rails once more. And then unfortunately, as a result of her addiction, she passes away, leaving Milo without a parent. Of course, Tabitha is going to jump straight in to take responsibility for Milo. She absolutely loves her nephew, she's spent a lot of time with him, and she wants to be there for him. So of course she is going to make sure that he has everything he needs and is in a good environment. So it's very shocking to her when she finds out that her sister actually left a will, and in this will she gave a man called Reese guardianship of Milo, and now Reese wants to take Milo away because he is absolutely serious about being this little boy's guardian. Now Tabby has a bit of history with Reese, and she's not too happy about this turn of events, and therefore they're kind of enemies at the start of this book, because Reese was essentially her sister's landlord, and when her sister first moved in, Tabitha went to Reese and said, I shouldn't be telling you this, my sister wouldn't like it, but she's had some issues, I really want to make sure that her and Milo are taken care of, so if anything happens and she can't pay the rent, please call me, because I really want to make sure that this little boy has a roof over his head. Now, unbeknownst to both of them, her sister is really playing them off against each other, and so what we find out is that Her sister has pretty much told Reese that Tabitha is kind of disowned her, is not helping her. And on the flip side of that, she's telling Tabitha to stay away, and that Reese doesn't want anyone at their house, and, you know, is very standoffish and all of that sort of thing. And then later, when her sister is really, really going off the rails, she tells Tabitha that Reese kicked her out of her apartment because she didn't pay the rent. And of course, Tabitha is enraged by this because she's like, I made him promise that he would call me if she couldn't make her rent, and I can't believe that she only missed one payment and he would kick her out. So like I said, they both get off onto a really bad foot because Reese doesn't think that Tabitha should have Milo because she's never been around, she's not been concerned, and Tabitha thinks that Reese shouldn't have anything to do with him because clearly he doesn't even know this little boy, he was just the landlord. But it couldn't be further from the truth. But Reese is a really great guy, and despite his misgivings, he starts to realise that Milo really is in the best place for him, and that Tabitha is absolutely doing everything she can to take care of him. The thing is, Milo really is taking his role as guardian seriously, and he doesn't want to give that role up. But there is a bit of a sticking point for him because he is actually a US citizen, and he only spends half of his time in Canada because Rosehill is in Canada, and he knows that he cannot stay in Canada forever, and so he's got some decisions to make about whether he's going to take Milo with him back to his home in Florida. And of course, Tabitha absolutely does not want that at all. She's like, you can't take Milo away from his home and from his grandparents. And so what they end up doing is entering into a fake marriage so that Reese can stay in Canada for longer and can kind of come and go as he please, and then they can become co-parents of this little boy. Now, I've put this recommendation into a masked men video, and that is because what we also discover is that Reese is also holding on to a secret, and that is the fact that he is a professional wrestler. His character name is Wildside, and of course when he's fighting in the ring he wears a mask. And not only does he do this for his character, but also because he fiercely wants to protect his identity, and he doesn't kind of want the public to know who he is. So Reese in this case is our man in the mask, but this time he's wearing it not because he's part of a secret society, but because of his job. And I thought that was really fun and perfect timing that I read it just last week and I could tack it on to the end of this video. So there you go, that is 9 romance recommendations featuring men in masks. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and if you've got any masked men recommendations, please don't hesitate to put those in the comments box down below. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Now this recommendation is I've put this recommendation into a masked men. Now I'll put this recommendation into a masked man. Masked men. Now I'll put this recommendation into a real name is Adam, but everyone calls him Rig. That's his. Or his real name is Adam, but everyone calls him Rig. That's kind of his. Rig. That's his nickname. Why can't I think of the word nickname? It's too late. Hiding there in. Don't need to say that. This is another dolly. At the start of this book, we have a situation where our heroine Bryn. Yeah. Hello. Right. So.